So, I will not lie. I haven't followed it as much as I have in past years. Like I said, I got rid of cable about a month or two ago, so I've had an entirely different experience watching sports. I have the Watch ESPN app, streaming on YouTube, streaming illegally, um, you know, those kind of things. So my experience and how much sports exposure I've had is different. Plus, my schedule's just changed. I got to commit a good amount of time to this, which does involve watching sports, obviously, like I have. But also for the topics that I want to discuss, I've got to go a little bit deeper into those. So I might exclude, excuse me, like baseball. I feel really bad. I have not been nearly into this baseball season as much as I have been others. And I've actually been to a few games. But I've been so focused on like NBA headlines, NFL headlines, that baseball has had to take a back seat. And that will change, obviously, now that the draft's over and the NFL free agency is pretty much over. I'm going to start transitioning into more baseball-heavy shows because that'll be the topic of the day. It just will be. I'm not going to be one of these guys who repeat their same two or three headlines over and over and over again and then just bring on a guest or two to make you feel like you're getting a different view and opinion. No, you're getting the same thing. It's just you're literally just getting someone else's recycled trash. So, haven't paid nearly as much attention to the NFL Top 100 Players list, but I love it. I love the show. I love the concept. I think it's really cool. I've always been someone who is big on how your peers view you. To me, it's the ultimate Kobe LeBron argument. If you ask any player from that era, they would take Kobe over LeBron. And to me, that says a lot. If you get voted a top 10 player by your peers, people got respect for you because they got to go out and compete the same way you do. They got to wake up at the same time you do. Maybe some of them even earlier than you do. Got to put in the same work, probably get paid less, and watch you just whoop their ass. And nobody likes to get their ass whooped. That's just once again, I don't know why pessimist has become such a theme of the day, but no one wants to get their ass whooped. So I went in, I was scrolling through the list, and I was like, okay, I saw this player, and this player. That's who I'm going to make my next topic about because I think this player is overrated, underrated, shouldn't be listed here, should be above this guy, should be below this guy. And I'm like, no, because, a lot of people are going to do that. So I simply was like, well, who's left? And they're going to be debuting the top 10 players on Monday. I believe it actually is Monday and Tuesday. I think they do 10 through 5, and then they do have another show, or 10 through 6, and then another show 5 through 1. Because I know they give the top 10 players, they give them 20-minute segments or 15-minute segments instead of the normal 10. So, the 10 players that are left, you've got Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Von Miller, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Khalil Mack, Julio Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, Odell Beckham, and Matt Ryan. So I was like, well, let me rank them for the players that they gave me left. Not that this is my personal top 10, but for what they get, for what options they gave me, I will rank them. Number 10, Ezekiel Elliott. I think he's number 10. He's going to be the first rookie to ever crack the top 10, but I think 10's about as far as he goes. It was a great season. I personally would not have put him above David Johnson, who was finished number 12, and I definitely don't think he's above Le'Veon Bell, who will show up later on my list. You have, at 9, Odell Beckham Jr., who I think should probably be the number 1 receiver in football. I think he's the most dangerous player in the sport when the football is in his hands. Because the one thing you cannot take away from some guy in a football field is when they have the ball in their hands and you just can't get them. If you can't run, catch, and tackle that guy, I don't care what kind of scheme you play. I don't care who you got on your side, who's coaching you. If you just can't get the guy, you can't get him. And he is the best big play receiver we have in the sport, even more so than Julio Jones. And he's the best player with the ball in his hands, above any other receiver and above any other running back. Le'Veon Bell, he's the best dual threat running back in football. He could get you 100 catches in a season, and he could get you 1,600 yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground. He's probably the most complete running back. him, once again, I bring up David Johnson, who I'm a huge David Johnson fan. He's also ridiculous on Madden. They're probably the most complete running back since LT. At number 7, Antonio Brown, who I think he's only going to fall a few spots. He was number 4 last year. I think he only falls a few spots. I think a couple guys rose up, whereas I think Antonio Brown is at this point, as great as he is, he kind of has like this flatline season where it's you just know he's going to get 110, 115 catches, his 9-10 touchdowns, and his 1,500 yards. And as great as those numbers are, you just know they're coming, so they don't blow you away. And it's like Marvin Harrison, who I think is a really good comparison, never blew you away because you knew he was going to get his 110, 115 catches, 9-10 touchdowns. But I do think, just like Marvin Harrison, I think Antonio Brown is the most hated receiver in football if you have to play him. Because the difference between him, Julio Jones, and Odell Beckham is Odell Beckham and Julio Jones can have a great game by having 5 or 6 catches, right? So that means if you're a corner, and especially a top-end corner, you're probably only getting beaten by this guy 5 or 6 times a game, right? That means the other 30, 40 times, or even 50 times you guys line up, you get the upper end. You get the upper hand. So you can go into that game and feel like, you know what, I did really well. I competed against one of the best guys at the position. Whereas Antonio Brown, like, you'll see this. I got the Bronco jacket on, full bias, out here. Chris Harris is one of, I hate the fact of he finished like 44, I think, this year, and he was 50 something last year. Like, Chris Harris is one of the 2 best corners in football. I don't care what anyone says. And he got absolutely turned around, whooped, destroyed, beaten, handed game film, and then whooped again when he played Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown had 15 catches on him. I don't think Chris Harris gave up 15 catches the next 5 games. When someone beats you on that routine of a basis, the same way Marvin Harrison did, you just hate that son of a bitch. You do. Because how are you supposed to feel good about that game? Everything that guy did, it might not have been for big play touchdowns, like Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, or T.O. or Randy Moss back in the day. If you are comparing Harrison's time frame, but when you get whooped 10, 12 catches a game for 90 to 100 yards and a touchdown, man, you want to go in the locker room and hit your head up against it. Number 6, Von Miller. I'm biased, so deal with it. He's obviously a top 10 player. I was actually really nice about this, and I didn't put him over the other guy who's going to be on this list, who I think he's better than, personally. Super Bowl 50 MVP, the most dominant outside edge rusher we've had since Lawrence Taylor, and I'll defend that against anyone. And I think he's the best defensive. I think he's tied for the best defensive player in the game. And J.J. Watt's only not on the list because he was injured, obviously. But if J.J. Watt's healthy, he's probably a top 5. He's a top 5 player. Number 5, Aaron Rodgers. There's been 2 QBs in the top 5 each year for the past 5 years, and I think that happens again. Aaron Rodgers had a bounce-back year despite struggling in the middle of the season. Still put up 40-something touchdowns, led the league. Like, once again, when you get to a certain level and people are just like, oh, you're supposed to do this, Aaron Rodgers was on pace for like 32 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and people thought, it's not that great. And then he had to sit there and throw 4 or 5 touchdowns last couple of games, and he got to like 41-7, and it was like, oh, well, yeah, that's right. Aaron Rodgers is that great. Number 4 is Khalil Mack. I think he'll get it simply because he was the defensive player of the year. Once again, I would take Miller. I'm biased over him. Great player, though. 3 is Julio Jones, the best receiver we've had since Calvin Johnson. And every year Calvin Johnson had comparable seasons to Julio Jones. Calvin Johnson was a top 3 player, or top 4 player, I apologize. How he wasn't number 2, or finished number 2 one year when he had the 2,000 yards. Number 2, Tom Brady. He's been in the top 4 the last 4 years. Just got his 5th ring, even though they do this voting pre-playoffs. But 28 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, gave the biggest middle finger to Roger Goodell. I think the players are going to go behind that. And who knows? If, in typical Patriot fashion, they probably stuffed the ballot box. And number 1, Matt Ryan. Not because I believe he's the best player in the league, but I made this list basing it off of the style that they've had it the last couple years. And if you look at it, the MVP has been number 1 every single year except one, and that was when J.J. Watt went fucking bonkers and he got number 1 over Aaron Rodgers. But otherwise, the MVP, Cam was number 1 over Brady last year. Manning was number 1 when he won the MVP. Rodgers was number 1 when he won the MVP. If you're the MVP of the National Football League, they're probably going to count you the number 1 player of that season. It's kind of how it works.